Here's an example of an isolation. Here's an example of an isolation. And here's an example of an isolation. And there is another example of an isolation. Hi, I'm Flec, and today we are going to learn how to do a one-hand Sidewinder isolation. I don't know if that's exactly what you call it, but that's what I'm going to call it here because names are just names. The technique is the technique, and that's what really counts. And we're here to learn technique, not argue over names. Isolations are some of my most favorite things to perform and favorite things to see the audience react to when I'm doing a performance live. One way you can define the word isolation is this. Isolations are a way of creating stillness while using motion, or using motion to create a sense of stillness, depending on how you want to phrase it. Now, this technique I'm about to show you is not one that I have perfected very well over the years myself, and I do enjoy practicing it every once in a while, not only because it's good exercise and it's really good for your mobility and your twisting of your wrist back and forth, but it's also because it's a very beautiful illusion and it might take some time to perfect, but the technique itself is relatively simple. It's just a matter of lining it up and making that illusion pop and trying to keep your hoop in one spot to make that isolation illusion really happen. So for this illusion to happen, we want to perform it on the side, so we're going to face profile so you can see the illusion better. All the other isolations I've taught so far involve facing the audience. This one is one you do while showing the profile view. Now you can do this illusion right here, this isolation, and you move it into a circle just like this. Now if you can do this in such a way where it's not hovering around up and down, forward and backwards consistently, it can look pretty trippy, and it satisfies the requirements of an isolation. As long as you use motion and the object appears to be still, then you are in effect performing an isolation. So this is an easy way of doing this isolation. What we want to do is focus on the use of just one hand and keeping that same circle as still as possible. Now keep in mind, once again, I am not the best at any of these techniques I'm showing you. These are techniques that I like to practice myself, and I like to teach other people who ask me how to do it. And that's just a little disclaimer before we move forward. Another disclaimer is this: safety, safety, safety. Isolations are something that doesn't involve a lot of risk taking, of swinging around and potentially dropping and breaking something. This is a metal hoop, so I'm concerned about this dropping and hitting maybe a cell phone or a keyboard or glass table or anything that's fragile really, or even my cat. I don't want my cat to ever get injured by anything ever. So even though we're not taking big risks in throwing this around, it's still important to consider your surroundings. A little bit of foresight and a little bit of common sense will go a long way in preventing any accidents. And I've discovered whenever you let your guard down and you're doing some sort of task that's simple and you take for granted that you got it down okay, that's when the accidents seem to happen the most. As someone who performs fire, I burn myself more often baking bread than rolling balls of fire on my bare skin. It's true too. It's ridiculous, but it's true. Anyways, back to the lesson. We're going to perform the one-handed Sidewinder isolation. And once again, I don't know if that's exactly what you call it, but that's what we're calling it here because I like the term Sidewinder anyways. So this is two hands rotating inside the hoop, and we're trying to make sure that it doesn't do a lot of the wavering back and forth like this or move it up, down, forward, and backwards. To keep that isolation crisp, you want to make sure that it stays in relatively one spot while the hand moves and traces around the circle nice and easy. Now for the one-handed technique that we saw earlier on in this video, it's going to involve holding it so the hoop is on the outside of your arm, just like so. And we're going to go down, all the way down like this. And when you get to this point, this is where it gets pretty tricky because this is where the hoop wants to go forward or backwards, and this is where mistakes tend to happen. You want to go down, and then here, this is where it gets tricky. You want to allow it to go all the way through with the wrist bent, and you have to twist your hand around and allow the hoop to spin and rotate in your hand so it's in a position where you're holding it from above now. I'll show you from the front so you can see a better view of that here. So we're going to go down and forward, and as we go here, you'll notice my grip. You see my grip here? What's going to happen is it's going to twist around like this. I'm going to just allow my hand to twist and come back up and around just like that to the top. And we'll go back to the profile. And now that you're here, you'll notice that the hoop is on the inside of your arm. We started on the outside, but now we're on the inside. And you're going to go down and forward like this. Try to keep that hoop in one area is the biggest challenge out of doing this isolation. We'll go down until we're underneath. Now this is where it gets very tricky. Once you go underneath and all the weight's on top, this is where a lot of the error happens. And this is also where momentum really helps you later on down the line. You'll find when you're doing isolations, if you add speed into it, that you'll get more stability. But we'll get into that later. Right now, we want to focus on trying to keep this hoop in one spot. And this is where you open up your hands. This is where the risky part comes in. You open up your hands a little bit and you allow that hoop to fall between your thumb and forefinger. And you bring your hand back up to the starting position right here. So we start here, we go down and around. Allow it to twist around to get to the top. Now that we're at the top, we go down and underneath. Allow it to fall between the thumb and forefinger and bring it back up to the start. So a view from the front, we're going to allow the hand to open up a little bit like that. Allow it to fall between the thumb and the forefinger. Trace up and around and back up to the starting position right here where the hoop's on the outside. So let's go through the whole process again from the profile, and I'll show you a front angle so we get a better idea. Now, pardon me if I use the other hand to hold the hoop, but to do this technique slowly, you have more of a chance of the isolation not working out anyways. And if I hold the hoop still with my other hand, I can show you the technical movements a little bit easier. So here we go. Let's start from the beginning. We go down and around. This is the tricky part, where a lot of, see if you pause, it moves back and forth. So go down and around, switch, go up and over, switch. So we'll start over from a better angle for the camera to see. We'll start here with the hoop on the outside of the arm. Go down and forward, and allow the hand to switch over to the top grip like this. Now it's the top grip, go all the way up and over and around, and then allow it to go between the thumb and the forefinger, open up a little bit. Swing it around a little bit, sorry about that. There we go. So we start at the beginning, we go down and forward and out. Allow it to rotate around to the top grip section. Now we're in the top grip, we're going to go down and underneath. Allow it to fall between the thumb and the forefinger and switch over to the top grip once again. Let's try doing a couple passes like this to see if we can keep it consistent and relatively still. Now I'll show you a couple from the front. You'll notice that you'll want to turn your arm inside a little bit, because what you have to consider is as you go around and you trace this, you're going to have to go on the outside and come in so the hoop comes really close to your armpit. Just like that. And then here, this is where the tricky part is, where you allow it to fall between the two. Go back to the top grip. Down and forward, up and over, up the top. Now you'll notice this technique is relatively difficult to learn with a small hoop. I'm using a small gauged hoop, but this hoop is more or less a perfect circle. There's just this little joint right here. Now I did this technique earlier with my larger gauged mini hoop, but the problem with this mini hoop is that it's kind of more of a teardrop shape than a round shape, so the isolation doesn't pop as much. But at least you can see how well it works with a larger gauged hoop. Another thing to consider is how close or far away your audience is while you're performing an isolation. The further away your audience is, the less likely they'll see little errors in the movement, and they'll see the overall isolation as a whole much easier, and the illusion will work a lot better when they're further away. The closer they are, the more likely they'll see the micro movements while you're doing the isolation, and it will be more apparent that it is moving and not quite isolated. So to summarize, once again, the larger the gauge hoop and the further away the audience is, the more likely the illusion will really pop. The skinnier the gauge hoop and the closer the audience is, the less likely the illusion will really pop. So at my disadvantage, we're sitting pretty close to this camera so you can see what I'm doing, and I'm using a smaller gauged hoop, but this is the only really round mini hoop I have at the moment. So let's try again. We're going to start with the hoop on the outside of the arm, holding it just like this, and we want to keep it touching the arm, because as we go down and around, we have to make sure that we can put this hoop close inside of our armpit in order to make sure we can keep that illusion alive. We have to work around the circle. We can't move the circle like this, because this is not an isolation. Although this is the technique that your hand will be doing, this twisting motion, this figure eight, this 2-beat weave, I think they call it. Back and forth, just like that. But we're not doing 2-beat weaves here. We're essentially going to be doing the same technique as a 2-beat weave, but working around the circle and tracing around the circle. So we start here, we go down and front and around, go up, over and back, and we'll get back up to the starting position just like this. And moving slow is tricky once again, but you'll discover with accuracy and the faster you move, the more the illusion will really go. Anyways, I hope this video was somewhat helpful to someone out there who's trying to do different hoop isolations. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, I'm not the best at these circus and flow arts, but I do love showing people what little I do know and how to execute these techniques. So with that considered, thanks very much for watching my video. I appreciate it very much. And please help yourself. Click on my playlist section to see what other kind of content I post. I post a lot here on YouTube. I post every single day, in fact, for the year of 2021. And I post about many different things. And I managed to organize all my content into various playlists so you can find content you might find interesting a lot easier. And that's a wrap, folks. I appreciate you watching this video once again, and I'll leave you with these words. Remember to never give up. Do your best, stay true to you, and be amazing, folks. Thanks for watching, and have a great night. Bye-bye.